Welcome back to the Show. Before we get to the subject at hand, Judge Marchant and the New York criminal case, the only case which Trump has actually been falsely convicted. Before we get to that, I want to focus on a couple of items in the news. First, Mike Huckabee was just selected to be a United States ambassador to Israel. It's a great choice. My friend David Friedman had been the previous ambassador. He was a great choice, and he served for 4 years as a wonderful ambassador. He was the one who helped bring the capital of Jerusalem, capital of Israel, to Jerusalem. I was there when the capital was moved. I was there with David Friedman. I think Mike Huckabee was there too. In any event, I've been in Israel with Mike Huckabee. He's a great choice, a wonderful man, a musician, a pastor, a former governor, very smart. His daughter is currently the governor of Arkansas. Great family, good people. I'm anxious to work with him. I just sent him an email offering to teach him a little Hebrew in exchange for having a good meal at the ambassador's residence in Jerusalem, where I've been many times. Turning from good to bad, just a minute on Amsterdam. The media tried to claim, the New York Times particularly, what happened after the soccer game was all the fault of the Jews and the Israelis. They tore down a Palestinian flag or a PLO flag or a Hamas flag, and therefore they deserve to get beaten up and almost killed. It's total nonsense. You don't respond to nonviolent actions with violent actions. Many Muslims believe that the appropriate response to verbal abuse, insulting the Prophet, doing cartoons of the Prophet, writing a book about him like the Satanic Verses, deserves death. But that's not a Western law. And but the proof that this had nothing to do with what some Israelis may have done, probably had nothing to do with Israel at all. Pure neo-Nazi anti-Semitism was what happened tonight in Amsterdam. The Israelis are all gone. There are no Israelis. There's no Israeli soccer team there, and Nazi thugs, just ordinary people from Holland, white people of non-Muslim background, started another anti-Semitic rage, throwing incendiary devices at trains, insulting Jews, attacking Jews. We're seeing a return of neo-Nazism, not only to Amsterdam, but the French authorities are very concerned about it too. We focus on Amsterdam and France for just a couple of seconds. Amsterdam wasn't captured by the Nazis. Amsterdam was Nazi. Holland was pro-Nazi. They regarded themselves as Aryans. They supported the Nazis. They collaborated with the Nazis. The same thing was true with France. There was some resistance in France, and there were some good people who resisted, but the vast majority of French people, both in the Vichy part of France and in the other parts of France, were perfectly happy under Nazi occupation, and they thrived under Nazi occupation. And many of them were Nazis, and they deported very large numbers of Jews. France and Holland deported more Jews than any other countries. Holland was probably the worst because the Dutch, many of them regarded themselves as Aryans, and they were very close to the Nazis. They wanted to become part of the Nazi regime. The difference is that in Germany after the war, there was repentance. There was an attempt to undo the damage. There was some restitution, education in the schools. That didn't happen in Holland. In Holland, people who collaborated with the Nazis went on to, great careers and became elected officials. There was very little recognition of the role that the Dutch people in Holland played in collaborating with the Nazis. Even you all know the story of Anne Frank. She was turned in, by Dutch people. There's all kind of dispute about who actually turned her in, but we know that in Holland during the period of the German occupation and the Holocaust, many Dutch people turned in Jews and collected money for doing it. So it just didn't surprise me. I don't think I'm not going to travel to Holland anymore. I'm going to not travel if France engages in this kind of anti-Semitism. I'm through with France. I'm going to Italy. I like Italy better anyway. But let's keep watching to see what happens in these European countries. There's an enormous amount of anti-Semitism in Norway, in Sweden, in Belgium, in France, mostly Northern Europe. It's interesting that there's so much in Northern Europe, less in Southern Europe, much less in Italy, and actually today, less in Eastern Europe, which was the heartland of anti-Semitism for so many years, Ukraine and Poland and Latvia and Lithuania. Today, they are a little better. And part of it is that they have more conservative governments and more conservative leanings among the people. And some of the anti-Semitism comes from the hard left and the radicals. Some of it just comes from ordinary neo-Nazi street thugs. I suspect that that's what's happening in Amsterdam. But we have to keep an eye on it. It should be part of the Trump foreign policy to combat anti-Semitism. There is an anti-Semitism ambassador whose job it is to monitor and combat anti-Semitism around the world. And I'm confident that the Trump administration will do a better job than the Biden administration and the Obama administration did in combating anti-Semitism. But let's watch. So now let's turn to lawfare. The worst example of lawfare, as you know, there's been so many. Florida, the classified case, which wasn't brought against Trump, but wasn't brought against Biden, was brought against Trump. The Georgia case where the prosecutor and her boyfriend committed perjury, in my opinion, in front of the judge. The Washington, D.C. case, which is on hold now, and the New York case. The worst of all of them was the New York case because there's a made up crime. Nobody understands. Nobody has ever been able to explain to me how you can turn a misdemeanor that is barred by the statute of limitations into a felony by giving a jury multiple choice and letting three of them decide one thing, three another thing, three something else, and three something else. I still don't understand it. But today, Judge Marchant kicked the can down the road and said, look, I know I was supposed to decide whether or not the case has to be thrown out. Give it another week. Another week in which President-elect Trump has the stigma of somebody who has been found guilty by a jury. There's no reason to postpone this. And there's some reason to suspect that maybe Marchant will postpone it even further. On the 19th, I don't think he's going to sentence him on the 19th. Remember, as soon as he sentences him, Trump then has the right to appeal. Right now, he has no right to appeal, so he's in limbo. He has been found guilty by a jury that allowed the Democrats to campaign against him on the theory that he's a convicted felon. Technically, you're not actually convicted until judgment is entered, and that happens on after the sentencing. But they were able to announce that he was a convicted felon, and he didn't have the right to appeal. It's possible Marchant will continue that and will say, look, I'm not going to sentence him because I can't make him go to jail. He's the president-elect of the United States, but I don't want to free him. So I'm just going to hold it in abeyance and thereby deny him the right to appeal. If that happens, I think the Trump lawyers should be able to take what's called a writ of mandamus or some other kind of extraordinary writ to the appellate courts and saying, look, you can't be denied a right to appeal by a judge refusing to sentence. If he refuses to sentence, let him throw out the conviction. But you can't require a criminal defendant to be in a state of limbo for 4 years, which is possible. My own prediction, again, here I predict, I'm not good at predicting election results, but I'm pretty good at predicting. court results, is that the judge will not do that, but will either sentence him, and perhaps to just a fine or something like that, or will blame it on the Supreme Court and dismiss the case. But he's not going to sentence him to actual prison. The American people wouldn't stand for that. We know that the Mayor Curley, I think it was, of Boston, actually served as mayor while in prison, and I think that's happened a couple of other times in local areas, but no president of the United States has ever. Oh, a man ran for president while in prison, and I think it was 1920. The socialist candidate Eugene V. Debs was in prison. Maybe it was 1916. I don't remember which year it was, 16 or 20, for opposition, probably 20, opposition to the First World War. And he was serving time under what was then called the still is called the Espionage Act. There's no real application to protest. But he was in prison when he ran for president. He got, over 1 million votes while in prison. There was some speculation that Trump could be in prison when he ran. He'd probably have doubled his lead if that happened, but it didn't happen. And my prediction, Marshawn will not sentence him to prison. And if he does, he'll stay the sentence and delay the sentence. But as soon as he sentences him, even if he delays the sentence, at that point, his right to appeal clicks in, and he would have the right to take the case to an appellate court. I can't imagine any appellate court upholding this conviction. First, the prosecution would have to lay out what the case is, and I don't know how they do it. There's no case here. This is Alice in Wonderland. The king's messenger says, he's in jail, not for what he's done, but for what he might do at some point in the future. And Alice says, there's something wrong somewhere. Well, there's something wrong somewhere. In this case, in New York, plenty wrong in this case. It never should have been brought. And of course, the district attorney, Alvin Bragg, didn't want to bring the case. He made a decision not to bring the case, as did, I think, his predecessor. And then one of the assistants threatened to go public, wrote an op-ed, pressured him into bringing the case, and he brought the case. And it never should have been brought in the first place. But he, like Letitia James, the Attorney General of New York, has campaigned on the promise basically to get Trump. Did you see what Letitia James did the other day, right after the election, the day after the election? She validated the title of my book. Again, remember, I wrote a book called Get Trump. She went after Trump again after he gets elected, saying, we're not going to leave him alone. We're going to go after him. We're going to make sure that, this and that and the other thing. Again, signaling that she's singling out Trump and devoting the resources of the citizens of New York to getting Trump. Sure, New York went for Harris, but not by as large numbers as they had gone Democrat in the past. And so there are a lot of New Yorkers, look, people on all sides of the political spectrum, ought to be upset when you have the Attorney General going after somebody on the ground of who he is, not what he did. Letitia James didn't even suggest or say what they were going after him on. We know that she went after him because he valued his property in Mar-a-Lago above what she thinks it's worth. And the judge found that it was worth $18 million. As I've said before on this show, I've offered to buy it. I'll raise the price. I'll buy it for $20 million. I can raise the money. I can get a loan because I can flip it the next day for 20 times that amount. The notion that she goes after him and gets him fined $500 million for hurting no one, defrauding no one, no victims, no harm, no foul, no harm, $500 million fine. That will be reversed, certainly reduced on appeal. But you have an Attorney General of a state that is determined to get Trump, and you have a district attorney whose re-election prospects depend on getting Trump. I would hope that neither of them would be reelected. Bragg ran against a very, very able woman and narrowly defeated her. But I don't think he's going to be able to win re-election based on the way he's handled the prosecution, and that's all anybody knows about. They also know about the case now pending involving the former Marine, who's in court right now for having put a chokehold. I don't think he thought it was a chokehold on a man who was on the subway screaming and yelling at people, and people were frightened. He did that case as well, a case that I believe should never have been brought. Too close, too close. It's there is a clear theory of innocence in the case, and when you have a case that could go either way and really depends on largely the prejudices, the racial composition of the jury, the if it had been a black man who had held a white guy, would the case have been brought? Was it brought because the Reverend Sharpton and others demanded that it be brought? If it was two white people or two black people, would the case have been brought? Cases like this generally do not rise to the level of criminal prosecution when there's a theory of innocence, which is plausible on its face. And here you have a theory of innocence, and that is he was a good Samaritan. I think the initial police report used those words. He thought he was doing the right thing. It may have turned out that he used too much force, too much pressure, but that's not a basis for bringing a criminal prosecution. Perhaps a civil tort by the family. I don't know whether that would win or would lose, but the stakes aren't as high as they are for a criminal case. He could get, years in prison for what he believed was the right thing. I think if you have a jury of subway riders who experience this kind of thing on a frequent basis, I think you're going to get at least some who will resist a conviction. So again, prediction. I find it hard to believe that, and I don't know what the jury selection was about. I wasn't there, and there hasn't been much about it. But a fair jury, a representative jury, I don't think you could find 12 people that would convict. That may result in a hung jury, it may result in an acquittal, but I would be surprised if there were a criminal conviction on the facts of this case. But, we're in the middle of the trial now. We'll see. We'll see whether he takes the witness stand. All these things are factors. So that's Bragg. So far, I don't think he's done anything that I approve of. I don't know how he runs the office. I was used to that office being run by people like Bob Morgenthau and Hogan and great and distinguished lawyers and distinguished prosecutors. I don't think what we're seeing now in any way emulates the giants who served in that office so effectively for so many decades. And so it's for me a big disappointment, which relates to what President Trump is going to do. I think he's going to pick strong United States attorneys in the Southern District of New York, the Eastern District of New York. Those offices, too, have been in some ways politicized. They deny it, but I know the incumbents, and the scent of politics permeates the office. It may not be partisan politics. It's more almost class politics. And let's see what Trump does. There are some very good people who have put their names in to be U.S. attorneys. And what we're going to see now, first, the president has to pick an attorney general. He does that first, because the attorney general is generally consulted as to who the U.S. attorneys will be, particularly in the major offices like the two in New York and New Jersey and Washington, D.C., and Chicago and Los Angeles. So we'll see who he picks as the attorney general. There are some very, very good candidates out there. My advice to him is to pick somebody who's extremely distinguished, somebody who is above reproach, somebody who will not be looking to use the office to take revenge on people, but somebody who will call it straight. And I think that's his inclination too, because the list that is before him is comprised of lots of people who fit that description. So let's wait and see what Judge Marchand does a week from next week. I mean, a week from, is it today or a week from Tuesday or Wednesday, Thursday? I don't remember the exact date, but he is going to then hopefully decide whether the case gets thrown out, and if it doesn't get thrown out, what the sentence should be, and at that point there'll be an appeal. If he does sentence him to anything, even a fine, there can then be an appeal, and I suspect that the appellate courts, whether it be the appellate division of the New York Court of Appeals or ultimately the United States Supreme Court, will not allow this conviction to stand. It's a disgraceful conviction and a real bad mark on the American system of justice. If you put it in front of 100 objective, neutral experts, you're not going to find one who really can justify this conviction in the state of New York. Under this conviction, Alexander Hamilton probably would have been convicted as well, along with thousands and thousands and thousands of businessmen who have paid hush money to prevent cases from going forward, and then listed them in ways that didn't disclose the exact nature of why the hush money was paid. Why do you pay hush money? To keep things hush. And the idea that if you pay hush money, you then have to reveal it. Why would anybody ever pay hush money? The most absurd prosecution I have ever seen. So we'll wait and see, wait and see how good my predictions are, and whether we can finally put all this behind us and move on to letting the president govern and hopefully have a good 4-year term, good for America. So here are today's letters. File a RICO case against all involved, Bragg and Letitia James, Jack Smith, Fannie Willis, Wade, all DOJ lawyers involved. Well, that's interesting because they all have immunity. You know, it's so interesting because you hear the Democrats all claim the president shouldn't have immunity. That puts him above the law. But the Democrats all have immunity. Every senator has immunity. Every congressman has immunity. Every prosecutor has immunity. Every judge has immunity. Why was anybody surprised that the same Supreme Court basically that gave immunity to all these other people? Remember, immunity for judges isn't in the Constitution. Immunity for senators and congressmen is, but immunity for judges is not in the Constitution. The Supreme Court just said if you really want to have judges act responsibly, you have to give them immunity. The same thing is true of the president. So it's not surprising, and it's completely hypocritical to say, well, they're above the law. No, they're not above the law. It's the law that says you have to give them immunity. That doesn't place them above the law. That places them within the law. Good day, sir. I am a constitutional conservative, and I appreciate and respect you so much for your character and values. I wish more liberals and conservatives would like you. I believe you are the modern-day John Adams. Well, I take that as a compliment, but not completely. John Adams, of course, is famous for representing the people who were accused of the Boston Massacre, but he also signed into law the Alien and Sedition Act, prohibiting free speech critical of the government. So, you know, I'm a fan of John Adams generally, but not of everything he did. So thank you. We need a full investigation into who was directing these lawsuits. The directors and the puppets must be brought to justice so this never happens again. Look, I agree there should be full investigation. And I do think checks and balances includes congressional hearings both by Senate committees and by House committees, both of which will now be controlled by Republicans, into the Bragg prosecution, the Letitia James prosecution, the 65 project, Fannie Willis and Wade, and some of these other cases. I'd like to know who funds the 65 project. I'd like to know what their relationship is to the Democratic Party, to the White House. These are all fair questions that can be asked by Congress, and their documents can be subpoenaed. I'd like to see the documents that led to them filing a charge against me when my only sin was I said, for future elections in Arizona, if you're going to use machines, the machines have to be transparent, and the machine companies can't claim privileges, business privacy privileges that the government couldn't claim. Perfectly plausible, winning constitutional argument, but not for the Project 65. Oh, My next letter is Project 65 should also be investigated. It should be investigated and perhaps sued. Well, we'll see. But I would like to first see Congress see if they can investigate Project 65, get the documents, and then perhaps there'll be a basis for a civil lawsuit. I think he should pick you for AG. I've already been the oldest person ever to argue a presidential impeachment case in front of the Senate. I don't think I want to be the oldest attorney general in history. There's a list of very good, vibrant young people happy to advise the attorney general. If she or he seeks my advice, I'm happy to advise anybody in this administration, as I advised people in previous administrations, on any issues relating to law, any issues relating to peace in the Middle East, or any issues of public interest. I'm somebody who's available, and I would love to give advice, and you can either accept it or reject it. There must be legislation put in place that prevents this from ever happening again under criminal penalties. I feel like Letitia James definitely engaged in selective prosecution. I have no doubt about that. And malicious prosecution, I have no doubt about that. There needs to be a penalty for that. Maybe it's just disbarment, but maybe it's jail time as well. But to show you how bad immunity is, if I say something defamatory of Letitia James, she can sue me, but I can't sue her because she has immunity and I don't. And talk about above the law. No, it's not above the law. It's the law, and the law should be changed. Can the new attorney general prosecute Fani Willis for RICO? Seems obvious. No, RICO is very, very hard to prosecute. I think that state prosecutors could prosecute for perjury, and there conceivably could be some federal prosecutions as well. You'd have to look very hard into the facts of the case. I think those that report Trump lawyers to the bar for false pretenses should be disbarred, and I'm not sure why Democrats can't do, why Dershowitz can't do that. Well, wait, we'll see. I generally fight back, and I'm gonna fight back. Okay. People are making a statement that you should help Trump. I disagree. Your assistance with Trump on any topic should be to help the country, not the president. I agree with that. And when I argued his case in front of the Senate, I said I was arguing it on behalf of the Constitution, on behalf of the presidency. I didn't even mention Donald Trump by name in front of the Senate. And I said that your dislike for any particular incumbent in the presidency shouldn't lead you to change the Constitution and to permit the kind of selective use of the impeachment, misuse of the impeachment provisions as the Democrats were doing under Adam Schiff, who is now going to be the new senator from California, and a man who has a big future with the Democratic Party, but he'll always be remembered for his role in the false impeachment, first impeachment of President Trump. Fan of your channel. Is the photo on the wall behind you on your right shoulder Franz Kafka? It is Franz Kafka, the author of The Trial and one of my favorite writers. You have many pictures that I'm sure you could talk about and why they are important to you, maybe occasionally introduce them. I've done that on occasion. I've talked about my documents, the Declaration of Independence, the letters from Jefferson, Adams, Hamilton, you name it, Washington. I have a great collection of letters, and on occasion I have talked about them and will continue to do that. The election was an overwhelming call for justice. Rather than prosecuting these culprits, time and energy would be better spent creating laws that prevent a recurrence of lawfare, which is another term for election interference and obstructionism. I agree. And finally, you always end on a negative note because you want to be fair. Here's a letter. Sorry, but you are a traitor, and I wouldn't trust you as far as I can throw you. You are now a front runner. You're a joke. I don't understand what I'm a front runner for, except perhaps to be a traitor. The Constitution actually defines treason as taking arms, basically, and giving assistance to enemies during war. So I don't think I fit that definition. I also don't think I'm a traitor to the Democratic Party. I didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left me. See you tomorrow.